This was supposed to be a funeral, a time to grieve. But instead, I stood there, alone, while my daughter-in-law celebrated with another man on a beach in Miami. What I discovered next would turn my entire world upside down. You won't believe how this shocking betrayal unfolds. As I stood by my son's grave, thinking I'd lost him forever, my daughter-in-law was doing the unthinkable. She wasn't crying, she wasn't mourning, she was living it up in Miami with his best friend. The first hint of this betrayal would come hours later, but what followed shocked me beyond belief. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. My heart hammered so loud, I thought the entire cemetery would hear it. I clutched my shawl tighter as the wind stirred the faded flowers on the casket. Around me, people wept quietly. Funeral music drifted through the speakers, but all I could focus on was her absence. My daughter-in-law, Lauren, was nowhere to be seen. Everyone murmured, asking where she was. Some whispered that she was overwhelmed, that she'd locked herself in the car, but I sensed something was wrong. My son, David, was supposed to be the one gone, but then I got the message. A text. "Mom, I'm not dead. Come to my house now." My knees went weak. I blinked hard, thinking it was a mistake. After what felt like an eternity in that place of sorrow, I had to leave. My feet moved mechanically across the gravel path, away from the stone markers, past shocked mourners and weeping relatives. I wondered, was I chasing a ghost? Or a lie? Just hours before, I had watched my son lie motionless in that casket, pale and silent. The funeral director had asked for final goodbyes, and I had laid a trembling hand on his cold forehead, feeling utterly bereft. Yet now, I held a message that shattered everything. He was alive. That revelation would be worth the journey if I reached David in time. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand not only what truly happened that day, but how one lie led to an even darker secret waiting to be uncovered. It all began 3 days earlier. David had been in Florida on business, meeting a client in Miami. He called me late that evening, sounding tired but hopeful. That was the last real conversation we had. The very next day, Lauren talked about how excited David was to come home and celebrate their anniversary. She made plans, she messaged old friends, she posted a photo of the two of them on the balcony of a hotel overlooking Biscayne Bay, hugging, laughing. But she seemed too eager. Something about her tone. I chalked it up to grief ahead of his return. Then came the sudden accident. According to a police report in Florida, his car had overturned on a dark highway, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. A body identified as his was brought home, and arrangements were made. The autopsy results were vague. Internal injuries consistent with a crash, but no fingerprint confirmation, no conclusive dental records. Our hearts shattered. We held the funeral in our small town. All of us, me, his father, his siblings, sobbed and swore never to forget him. After the burial, as I turned to leave, a tiny whisper of doubt nudged me. Something in my chest urged me to scroll through my phone one last time. That's when I saw it. Lauren's Instagram feed. A selfie. On a yacht in Miami, with David's closest friend, Marcus. Their arms around each other. The caption read, "Live life to the fullest." They smiled as bright as sunshine. My breath froze in my throat. My heart pounded. Why was Lauren in Miami that night, with Marcus, and why had she disappeared from the funeral? I tried to rationalize. Maybe her grief was too much. Maybe she'd run away, needing space. But even as I told myself those things, fear crept in. What had she known? And what if this was only the beginning? I flew to Miami on the first flight I could get. My mind roared with questions. At the airport, I called everyone I could think of: Lauren, Marcus, David's friends. No one answered. At the hotel she had posted from, they said she checked out early. Marcus's number rang to voicemail. I drove toward his beach house, every minute a lifetime. Then I saw his car parked outside. My chest tightened. I entered the house empty. On the coffee table lay a stack of hotel key cards, an open bag, a phone still plugged into the charger with Lauren's wallpaper. I tapped it. Messages, social media threads, pictures of recent laughter, and then one that made me gasp. A video sent from David's number, a shaky image of him alive, eyes wild, whispering, "Mom, come now." I sat trembling on the edge of the couch, phone in hand. What had I walked into? Was this real? Was my son alive, or had someone stolen his voice to lure me in? I forced myself up and searched every room. It was clean, but every door was unlocked, as though someone had just vanished. I knew I had to dig deeper. I reached out to a private investigator I once knew in Florida, Lara Santoro. She was sharp, relentless. By the time the sun fell, Lara had unearthed something chilling. Lauren had booked a private plane ticket 2 days before David's supposed crash on a route that would never show on public manifests. Marcus's phone records showed calls to an unknown number late into that same night. The crash report, altered. Witness statements, contradictory. There were fractures in everything I believed to be truth. At 2 a.m., I got another message from David's number. "Meet me at the pier. Bring it." I didn't know what "it" meant. Evidence? Answers? But I obeyed. Under moonlight, I stood on the wooden dock, waves lapping quietly, shadows stretching, footsteps behind me. "Mom?" His voice cracked. I turned. There he was, alive, bruised but breathing. I ran, throws my arms around him, sobbing. He pulled away, eyes fierce. "They told everyone I was dead," he said. "Lauren orchestrated it with Marcus. They needed me gone, so they could control everything: my inheritance, my name, our company. They faked the crash, used body double, doctored records. I escaped when I realized their plan. I've been in hiding, gathering proof, but now I need your help." I stared, tears blurring. Betrayal, relief, rage, love, all collided. He handed me an envelope. Inside, bank statements, altered records, phone logs, hard evidence. Lauren and Marcus had mapped every step, prepped every lie. They believed they could bury both David and the truth, but they underestimated a mother's love. Stay with me, because in the final act, you'll discover how I confronted them, how justice nearly slipped from my fingers, and the twist that changed everything. I promise the payoff is worth your time. You'll see how far someone will go to steal the life they believe they deserve, and how one message from an impossible source can unravel an entire conspiracy. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Don't let this kind of story slip past you. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. For those who say you'll wait, come down into the comments and tell us why you won't. I guarantee you'll regret missing the end of this one. My son's funeral was supposed to be a time of mourning, but there was a strange emptiness in the air. My daughter-in-law wasn't there. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't understand where she was. I was left alone to bury my son. It didn't feel real. The undertaker's hands trembled slightly. The minister's voice echoed hollow in the hushed chapel. Mourners whispered condolences. But everywhere I looked, I expected to see Lauren, to see the grief in her eyes, to see her beside me. Instead, I stood by his casket, surrounded by people who had lost him too, yet I felt more alone than I ever had. In that emptiness, I rehearsed every memory we had shared. His laughter at dinner, the way he used to call me Mama, how he and Lauren had planned the future. I pressed my fingers against my face, willing the world back into place, but it refused to settle. I tried to stay composed, but inside I whispered, "Where is she?" The funeral home staff approached, confirming the procession would start in a few minutes. I nodded absent-mindedly, hearing the organ's first notes drift through the doors. As we filed outside, I scanned the crowd. No Lauren. No one could tell me where she was. I slipped past the mourners and peered behind the hearse, still no sign. My heart pounded, my mouth tasted like dust. As the pallbearers hoisted the casket, I felt as though I were watching from the outside, powerless. That's when a strange thought crossed my mind. What if she wasn't just grieving in private? What if she was doing something else entirely? The day wore on, the heat pressing against your skin, the sunlight harsh and accusing. As we drove toward the cemetery, I stared at my phone, half expecting a message from Lauren. "I'm sorry I can't be there." But nothing came. Instead, a dread that I couldn't silence settled into my bones. Could she have been hiding something from me? Was she intentionally absent? I replayed every recent conversation, every moment I'd spent with her, and wondered whether the smiling facade I'd accepted was nothing more than a mask. I kept telling myself it must be anguish, shock, fear, yet something inside kept whispering that grief alone could not explain her absence. We arrived at the graveside, and as the minister began the eulogy, I watched the faces in the crowd. Some wept, some lowered their heads. I sensed a tension, a hesitation, in the air. I stood rigid, anchored to that spot, my thoughts spinning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lauren's smile in Miami that afternoon, her arm around Marcus, the caption, "Live life to the fullest." What did that mean? Why had she vanished? The day dragged on, and I was left with more questions than answers. When the ceremony ended and people started to disperse, I lingered at the headstone. The wind swept the graveyard, stirring petals. I realized the truth was out there, somewhere, masked by grief, and I was determined to find it. But before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you're already here, if this story matters to you, please subscribe now, because what comes next will change everything you think you know. Don't walk away yet. If you don't subscribe, how will you see the moment when I confront her? How will you witness justice? Stay with me. Hours later, I saw a post on social media that made my heart drop. A selfie of my daughter-in-law on a beach in Miami, captioned, "Live life to the fullest." But it wasn't just her. Next to her was Marcus, my son's best friend. The man who had grown up in our house, eaten at our table, called me Mom like one of my own. There he was, smiling broadly, sunglasses perched on his head, his hand resting casually on her shoulder as if they had no care in the world. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The image didn't make sense. The funeral had ended only hours before, yet there they were, basking in sunshine, laughing, drinking from coconut shells as if life had handed them a second chance. For me, the world stopped. I remember clutching my phone so tightly my fingers hurt, staring until the screen blurred. How could she? How could they? I scrolled through the comments under the photo. People were cheering them on. "You both deserve happiness. Finally living your best life." My stomach twisted. Nobody knew my son was supposedly dead. Nobody knew she had just missed his burial. Nobody knew that I had spent the day watching the earth close over what I believed was his coffin. A sickening wave of betrayal washed over me. It felt like acid coursing through my veins. I tried to make sense of it. Was this an old picture? Had someone hacked her account? But the timestamp said it was posted just 2 hours after the funeral. I refreshed the page again and again, hoping it would vanish. It didn't. The post remained there, mocking me. I sat down, trembling, the edges of my world cracking. I felt anger rise through the grief, sharp and burning. Why would she do this? What did this mean for me and my son's memory? I thought of the vows she had spoken on her wedding day, promising to love him till death do us part. Death had barely settled in before she chose a beach over his grave. I could hear my late son's voice in my head saying, "Something doesn't add up, honey." And he was right. Something was terribly wrong. I wanted to confront her immediately, to call her, to scream through the phone, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Instead, I opened her profile again. More photos. A short video clip of her clinking glasses with Marcus on the deck of a yacht. A shadow of disbelief crossed my mind. The ocean glimmered behind them, waves crashing softly, music playing faintly in the background. They toasted to new beginnings. That phrase echoed in my head like thunder. New beginnings. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with her. How she'd cried so convincingly after the accident. How she had insisted on handling most of the funeral arrangements. How she told me not to view the body because it was too damaged to look at. Every word, every gesture suddenly seemed calculated. And in that sleepless darkness, an idea began to form, a terrible, impossible thought. What if my son wasn't dead? It sounded crazy at first, but as I sat in that silent house, surrounded by his photos and the faint smell of his cologne, I began to recall details I had ignored. The coroner had been vague. The police officer had sounded uncertain. The death certificate had been rushed. Nothing had ever truly confirmed that the body they buried was my son's. I rose from my bed, my heart hammering, and opened the folder of documents she had given me after the crash. The signatures were inconsistent. The phone number on one of the reports didn't match the police precinct listed. Every page screamed fake. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was I living inside a nightmare? My thoughts were racing, each one darker than the last. I picked up my phone again, hovering over Lauren's contact. I typed, "Where are you?" and hit send. No reply. I called Marcus next. It went straight to voicemail. I sent a message to one of David's old colleagues in Florida, asking if they'd heard from him after the supposed accident. The reply came minutes later. "Weird that you mention him. I got an email from David yesterday, just his initials, but it came from his old address." My breath caught in my throat. Could it be possible? The minutes dragged into hours. Then, as dawn began to break, my phone buzzed. The vibration startled me so violently that I nearly dropped it. My mind was still clouded with fury, heartbreak, and confusion. But something about that sound made my entire body go still. I looked down, expecting maybe another meaningless condolence message or perhaps another social media notification about that cursed photo of my daughter-in-law living her best life in Miami. But it wasn't that. It was a text. And when I saw the name on my screen, David, my knees buckled. I stood frozen, staring at it, unable to breathe. My fingers trembled as I tapped to open it. The message was short, but it felt like the entire world stopped spinning as I read the words, "Mom, I'm not dead. Come to my house now." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The air around me thickened. I felt my pulse in my throat, my ears, everywhere. My mind went blank, and then it started racing faster than it ever had. "Mom, I'm not dead." Those 4 words echoed again and again in my head until I thought I might lose my mind. How could this be? I had just buried my son hours ago. I had watched the casket being lowered, heard the minister say his final prayer, felt the earth cover the box that supposedly held his body. How could he be alive? Was this some kind of cruel joke? I sank to the floor, gripping my phone tightly, my breaths coming in shallow gasps. A dozen emotions flooded me all at once: shock, confusion, hope, fear, betrayal. My first thought was that someone had hacked his phone to torment me. Maybe Lauren, maybe Marcus. But no, the tone of that message, the urgency in it, the way he called me Mom, exactly as he always had, it felt real. Too real. I could almost hear his voice. Still, my mind fought against the impossible. Could my son have faked his own death? Or was someone using his number to manipulate me? I stared at the message again, reading it over and over. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to reply, but my mind screamed for caution. What if it wasn't him? What if it was a trap? But then another message appeared, as if sensing my hesitation. "Please, Mom, trust me. Just come. Don't call anyone." My body went cold. Don't call anyone. Why would he say that? I felt torn between terror and hope. If there was even a small chance that my son was alive, I had to take it. My heart was still raw from the grief of losing him. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him twice. I stood, grabbed my coat, and rushed for the door. The night air hit my face like ice as I ran to my car. Every mile I drove felt like a question I couldn't answer. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I whispered to myself, "Please, let this be real." The roads blurred beneath the headlights. I barely remember driving. My mind replayed the moments leading up to his supposed death. The car crash, the sealed coffin, the quick funeral. I remembered how Lauren had insisted the body be cremated right after the burial. That detail now hit me like lightning. Why would she be in such a rush? And what if the person in that coffin wasn't David at all? By the time I pulled into the driveway of my son's house, the sky was a deep navy blue. The windows were dark, and the front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, my heart pounding. I whispered his name softly. "David?" No answer. The house smelled faintly of his cologne, sandalwood, and cedar. I stepped inside, trembling, my phone clutched tight in my hand. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like thunder. Then I heard a faint movement from upstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. And then, at the end of the hallway, the guest room door opened slightly. When I reached the top of the stairs, my knees nearly gave out. Standing in the doorway of that dimly lit room was my son alive, breathing, staring back at me as if he'd seen a ghost. And maybe, in a way, he had. Because in that moment, I wasn't his mother anymore. I was the woman who had buried him, cried for him, mourned him, and then found him standing before me, as if none of it had ever happened. My mouth went dry. The room spun. Every sound faded until all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. How? That was the only word I could manage. Just how? He didn't move at first. His eyes glistened with guilt, with fear, maybe even relief. "Mom," he said quietly, "please, just listen to me." But I couldn't. I took a step closer, my voice trembling. "I buried you. I stood over your grave. I saw the casket go into the ground. How could you do this to me?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a man trapped in his own web. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," he murmured. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Find out what? Exactly? That my son is alive while his wife is partying with your best friend in Miami? That I cried myself to sleep every night for a lie?" He froze when I said that Miami. His eyes darted toward the window, avoiding mine. That's when I knew. He already knew about her. I stepped closer, anger boiling beneath my grief. "Tell me the truth, Daniel. Why?" His voice cracked as he finally spoke. "Mom, she was trying to kill me." The words hit me like a slap. I stared at him, unable to breathe. "What did you just say?" He looked terrified now, his hands shaking. "Lauren. She planned it all. The car crash, the life insurance, everything. I found out she and Marcus had been seeing each other for months. They were planning to take everything once I was gone." I covered my mouth, shaking my head in disbelief. "So, you faked your death?" "I had no choice," he said, his voice trembling. "I had proof of what they were planning, but I needed time. I needed them to think I was dead, so they'd expose themselves." The weight of it all hit me like a wave. The betrayal, the deceit, the heartbreak, it all made sense now, and yet it hurt even more. The woman I had welcomed into our family, who called me Mom, had been planning my son's death all along, and the man I thought of as another son had betrayed us both. I could barely speak. "You let me bury you," I whispered, tears running down my face. "You let me stand there and think my only child was gone." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and his face crumbled. "I'm sorry, Mom. I thought I was protecting you. If you knew, she might have come after you too." I turned away, my heart shattering with every word. "Protecting me?" I said bitterly. "You destroyed me." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, almost unbearable. But then, I wiped my tears and steadied my voice. "Where is she now?" He hesitated. "She doesn't know I'm alive." I took a deep breath. "Then it's time she found out." That night, we planned it together, mother and son, united not by joy, but by the need for truth. By morning, I would face the woman who had shattered my world, who had laughed on a beach while I wept over an empty grave. When the door finally opened and Lauren walked in, her confident smirk told me she had no idea what awaited her. She didn't even look surprised to see me there. She just dropped her purse on the counter and sighed dramatically. "You again? What do you want now?" I said nothing. I simply stepped aside. And when she looked past me, when her eyes landed on my son, standing there alive, the color drained from her face in an instant. Her mouth fell open, her knees buckled slightly. For a second, she couldn't even speak. "Daniel?" she gasped. "You're how—" He stepped forward, calm but cold. "Surprised to see me?" She backed away, shaking her head. This can't be." "Oh, it's real," he said. "Every tear my mother shed, every lie you told, every dollar you tried to steal, it's all real." Her voice trembled. "I can explain." "Explain?" I cut her off. "Explain how you posted a picture with Marcus hours after his funeral. Explain how you were ready to cash in on his life insurance while his grave was still fresh." Her lips quivered, eyes darting wildly. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I snapped, my voice rising. "Because right now, all I see is a woman who faked grief for a man she tried to kill." The room went silent. The weight of her own lies pressed down on her, visible in every trembling breath she took. And then, just like that, she broke. She turned to Daniel, tears falling fast. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. "Marcus said it was just for the money. He said you'd be fine. I didn't know." Daniel's voice hardened. "Stop lying, Lauren. That's when the mask fell completely. She straightened, her tone turning sharp. "Fine," she spat. "You were always weak, Daniel. Always so easy to manipulate. You deserved everything that happened." I felt my stomach twist. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the sweet daughter-in-law I once knew. She was a stranger, cold, calculating, and utterly remorseless. Before she could say another word, Daniel pulled out his phone. "It's over," he said quietly. "I recorded everything." Her eyes widened. Panic spread across her face. She lunged toward him, but I stepped between them, holding my ground. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt strong again. "You'll never hurt him again," I said firmly. She froze, realizing it was over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of justice stirring within me. But before we continue, before I tell you what happened when the police arrived, when Lauren finally faced the consequences of her actions, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Stories like this are not just tales, they're warnings. And if you think this story couldn't possibly get darker, you're wrong. Don't be the one who hears about it later. Subscribe now, or you'll miss what happens next, and trust me, you'll want to see how it all ends. The police arrived just before dawn. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of my son's house, the same house where I had once celebrated birthdays, holidays, and quiet Sunday dinners. Now, it was the scene of truth, betrayal, and justice. Lauren stood there in handcuffs, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the arrogance finally stripped away. She wasn't the confident woman posting selfies anymore. She was exposed, the mask had fallen, and all that remained was guilt. Marcus was arrested 2 days later in Miami. The same photo that exposed their affair had led investigators straight to him. It turned out the two had drained joint accounts, altered insurance policies, and even tried to falsify documents to claim assets in Daniel's name. The plan had been carefully crafted, but greed always leaves fingerprints, and theirs were all over the lies they built. Watching her taken away didn't bring joy. Not really. Justice doesn't always heal you. Sometimes it just stops the bleeding. As I stood on the porch, the morning sun breaking over the quiet street, I realized that I had spent months grieving a man who had been forced into hiding. And though my son was alive, the wound of those lost days, the funeral, the crying, the loneliness would always remain. But there was peace in knowing the truth. Peace in knowing that no matter how cruel the world becomes, truth has a way of clawing its way out. Daniel eventually rebuilt his life, quietly and carefully. He moved to another state, started a new business, and spent years trying to make amends for what he had put me through. I won't pretend it was easy to forgive him. The memory of that casket, that empty grave, still haunts me at night. But I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of it. Lauren was sentenced to years behind bars. She tried to play the victim, to blame Marcus, to twist the narrative, but the evidence was undeniable. Marcus, too, faced his reckoning. And though the courts handed them their punishment, the true sentence was far greater, the loss of everything they had tried to steal. In the end, justice wasn't just served in the courtroom, it was served in the quiet unraveling of their lives. The truth had stripped away their illusions, and no amount of lies could cover it up again. Life, in all its cruel irony, has a way of restoring balance. My son got a second chance. I got closure. But closure doesn't mean the pain goes away. It just means you learn to live with the scar. I still visit that grave sometimes, the one that once marked a lie, but now reminds me of survival. The tombstone doesn't carry his name anymore, but when I stand there, I think about the woman I used to be, the mother who buried her son, and the mother who later found him alive. They're not the same person. Grief changed me. Truth changed me more. And maybe that's the real lesson. That sometimes life will break you so completely that when you finally stand again, you're not who you were before. You're stronger not because you survived, but because you refuse to stay buried in the lies of others. Before this story ends, if you've made it this far, if you've felt the weight of every twist, every secret, every betrayal, then don't leave without subscribing. Because somewhere, another story, just as shocking, just as real, is waiting to be told. And if you don't subscribe now, you'll miss it, and I promise, you'll want to be here when the next truth comes to light. Watching everything I'd built with my son crumble into secrets and lies was the hardest thing I've ever endured. But in the end, the truth always finds its way to the surface. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved deeply? Maybe not in a way this extreme, but in a way that left you questioning everything? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who your words might help heal. And if you were in my shoes, if you found out your loved one faked their death, what would you do? Would you forgive, or would you walk away and never look back? And tell us how you would handle it. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next, because trust me, this story isn't over. The truth behind what my daughter-in-law and my son's best friend did after everything unraveled is something you'll have to see to believe. Stay tuned, and remember, sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.